This is an English-only version of a talk offered in September of 2016. The original presentation was accompanied with Spanish interpretation. If you are interested in any of the diagrams in this talk, I will provide them for you. Just be in touch with me at my normal email. This talk was first offered when the sun was in Libra, and esoteric students usually study the opposite sign from the obvious exoteric position of the sun. So this is a talk about Aries. Aries is a fire sign. In the Rosicrucian philosophy, we learn about various kinds of fire. There is the transcendental fire of spirit. Max Heindel tells us that spiritual fire from heaven consumes the flesh of earthly living. That is, if we are living in the Spirit and bringing it into our life. It is that and more. It actually consumes all matter, all concrete states of being, until it has absorbed all of the soul within matter and has transformed it into spirit. There is the fire of the desire world. We recognize this when we have burning desires. Desires that demand satisfaction, and we feel the burning until we give in or until we dissolve the desire. There is irony in the fact that when we give in to a selfish desire, the consequence is pain. There is burning pain in the fire of many positive desires even. When we have compassion for the suffering in agony of others, we feel their suffering, and also we feel our desire to help them. It is this pain of compassion that is the driving agency of effective healing prayers. It is what fires us up to reach to the life spirit. There is also the fire of the etheric subdivision of the physical world. In comparison to the desire world, this is a quiet fire. The ethers, being a projected substance that is reflected from life spirit, it is a protective, life-giving fire. In a forest, the etheric fire works quietly, steadily vitalizing and growing all of the life forms for as long as they live. Then there is the fire of the chemical subdivision of the physical world. Here, where we focus our attention when we live here on earth. That fire is also etheric, but a much lower grade than the fire of life. In our solar evolutionary creation, the chemical subdivision of the physical world is the end of the line. From our perspective, the spiritual fire of the spiritual deity we call God penetrates no more deeply into matter than the chemical subdivision of the physical plane. That's all we can know about. There may be more. Fire here, in the chemical subdivision of the physical world, which is actually etheric fire, is completely expended in burning or consuming matter. It consumes mineral matter to awaken it from its deep unconsciousness as a first step toward divinity. Since the time of what is called the fall, our consciousness has been the consciousness of death, not the consciousness of life. Death is reflected in our materialistic science. According to the second law of thermodynamics, all energy passes from a higher state to a lower state until it is lost into entropy, into degradation, into chaos, into cosmic death. In materialism, there is no recognition of the awakening of consciousness in the mineral state. It would be considered absurd nonsense. However, the very careful study of the transformations in chemicals, which they do, is important and valuable to us, so that we should be thankful to them for their service to humanity, even though they may not have spiritual insight. In this talk, we are going to talk about the fire in the etheric and chemical subdivisions of the physical world. We're going to talk about the fire in the corresponding human, vital, and dense physical bodies. This will be a very shallow and brief talk because the subject is, again, vast and complicated. We could spend years studying it and still be only beginners. When we studied Libra, we studied homeostasis. Homeostasis is a state of balance. In perfect homeostasis, there is no change. And if there is no change, there is no new experience. If there is no new experience, there is no soul growth. If there is no change, nothing gets done. Aries is a cardinal sign, a sign of action, a sign of change, a sign of newness. Aries wants to change everything, and it wants to do so as soon as possible. Now would be best. Aries is ruled by Mars, the planet of drive and desire. Mars gets things done, by force if necessary. Libra is also a cardinal sign, a sign of action. But the action of Libra is to restore the balance upset by Aries and Mars. At most, Libra refines and completes and polishes the things started by Aries. It is a planet of finishing, in every sense of the word finishing. Aries is notorious for starting things and not finishing them, and its work is often crude. The Aries fire of change in chemistry, biochemistry, and physiology is called oxidation. Fire of any kind requires three things: fuel, ignition, which is usually in the form of heat, and oxygen. When we burn wood, wood is the fuel, the oxygen is in the air, and the ignition comes from the heat of a match or some kind of igniter. When we burn wood, the carbon in the wood is oxidized and is released as carbon dioxide. Some of the hydrogen in the wood is also oxidized and is released as water. Heat is released very rapidly, and when it releases flammable gases and heats unoxidized particles in those gases, that is called flame. Flame is the particles radiating light from the heat. Fire, especially in the form of flame, is fascinating. Flame is always new and different, which is one of the reasons why it is so fascinating. Aries almost always likes new things. Fire is fascinating at almost any level. As spiritual aspirants, we are fascinated by the infinite facets of the universal spirit, which is always new, always different. Some of us have experienced a desire fixation which is fascinating. Flame in the physical world is fascinating. Aries is the sign of identification. Aries will say, I am this, or I am that. I am is an Aries keyword. Identification with flame is the archetypal fascination, and hence we have Aries ruling the pyromaniac or the arsonist. Our fascination in this talk is with what could be called the fire of life. It is an extremely complicated cycle of oxidation called metabolism. There is heat, but no flame, and the heat is vital. There are many chemical reactions in metabolism that require an advanced knowledge of organic chemistry. In order to understand them, it would take much more than we are capable of in this little study. First, let's take a little side trip into chemistry. The major subdivision of chemistry is into organic and inorganic chemistry. In organic chemistry, we have the chemistry of the mineral kingdom. Because minerals are so simple and obedient, inorganic reactions are simple, obvious, and very fast. Inorganic ionic reactions do occur in the physical body, as we saw with the sodium-potassium pump when we discussed the absorption of water in the Scorpio talk. Most of the chemical reactions in the body are organic. Organic chemistry is different from inorganic. Electrons, as ions, are used in the physical body, but everything in organic chemistry is focused on the 4 hydrocarbons: hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. These elements, which refer to the 4 fixed signs we discussed when we discussed ossification. They have properties for the expression of life in form. They can be made into many complex forms. Organic reactions are usually much slower than the almost instantaneous inorganic reactions. The complexity and consequent slowness are because they are the product of a vital body. Having a vital body that can change form and grow and heal itself is at least one step above the mineral state. That step of advancement and the advantages it gives has greater requirements. It has greater complexity. In a way, it is something like the difference between being single and being married with a family. A single person can get up and go at a moment's notice, while getting a family to go requires greater logistics. Of course, there are things in family life that are not available to singles who miss out on a lot of things. Organic reactions occur in forms that are produced in and by a vital body. Metabolism is an expression of life in form. Because of that, the metabolic fire is different from inorganic fire. The differences are immediately apparent in the two phases of metabolism. One phase is called catabolism, which breaks down chemical forms into simpler component forms. Catabolism is both intracellular and extracellular. That is, it occurs within cells and outside of cells. The breaking down of food in the gastrointestinal tract is an example of extracellular catabolism. We will come to intracellular catabolism in just a few minutes. The other phase of metabolism is called anabolism. Anabolism is a process of building form and not breaking down. In short, it is in growing and it is in healing. We hear of athletes taking anabolic steroids, which are hormones that increase the anabolism of building muscles. This anabolism, which leads to a greater organization, is counter to the second law of thermodynamics. It produces something much more sophisticated and not something that's being broken down. It is only possible because it takes place in the matrix of a vital body. Scientists can chart the chemistry of anabolism, but they ignore the metaphysical implications, including the superseding of the laws of thermodynamics. In this talk, we'll mostly focus on catabolism. We are studying Aries, change, and the Mars energy necessary to make change. Because of that, we are going to limit ourselves to intracellular catabolism. That is the catabolism that takes place inside of the cell. Intracellular catabolism is how cells burn food to release energy, the energy that we need to live and to do things. In physiology, there are 6 classes of nutrients for the human dense physical body. They are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, minerals, vitamins, and water. To repeat, they are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, minerals, vitamins, and water. We have already studied how water is taken into the bloodstream. Water requires no digestion, and it is not metabolized, though it does enter into metabolic reactions. Minerals enter into the body ionically or by being part of molecules of nutrients. Minerals themselves are not metabolized. Vitamins enter the body in 2 ways, either from nutrients or from sunshine. Vitamins participate in both catabolic and anabolic processes, but they are not metabolized. Vitamins are coenzymes, and they are very important, but not directly relevant to our current study as we are doing it, so we will have to study them at a special time somewhere in the future. This leaves us with 3 nutrients which are metabolized: carbohydrates, lipids or fats, and proteins. Each of these nutrients has its own kind of metabolism, its own kind of catabolism within metabolism. But the final stage of all forms of metabolism is called the Krebs cycle, and it is common to all types of catabolism. Before being metabolized, each of these classes is broken down by extracellular catabolism, that is, the digestive process. Eventually, if we have the time, we will study digestion over several talks. For now, we're just going to simply deal with the nutrients. Carbohydrates are broken down to simple sugars during digestion. The most simple and the most general sugar is glucose. The metabolism of glucose is called glucolysis. Lysis means digestion. We've run into it before. In glucolysis, glucose goes through 5 complex chemical reactions, and it becomes a simple hydrocarbon which is called an acetyl group. The biochemistry of this is too complex for us at present. Carbohydrate metabolism is like a paper fire. It burns fast and it gives intense energy, but it is not steady and it doesn't last very long. Lipids, or fats, are broken down to glycerol and fatty acids during digestion. They are absorbed by lacteals, which are little fingers in the intestines, but they are special little fingers used only for fats. The other nutrients enter through the villi, the carbohydrates and such. The body can store glycerol by turning it back into fat for storage if it does not need the energy. This happens if we eat rich fatty foods. It gets stored and we put on weight much faster than we want to. Fats have a lot of chemical energy potential, and their metabolism releases a lot of heat. Now, unless one is doing a lot of sustained physical work, or if one lives in a very cold climate, such as an Arctic or an Antarctic climate, one should eat lipids, including oils, sparingly to avoid becoming fat. It's inefficient to carry around a lot of extra fat weight. Fats are prepared for metabolism in the liver, in another chain of biochemical reactions, which is called beta oxidation. The final product of beta oxidation is the acetyl group, the same acetyl group as produced by glucolysis. There are other sidelong chains of biochemical reactions in the metabolism of fats, but they are just a little too much for us and they're not directly relevant to what we're looking into. The body prefers to metabolize carbohydrates because carbohydrates are simple and fast and immediately available. It's that Aries quality. It wants that energy now. Lipids are its second choice. Protein metabolism is the last choice. Only when other energy sources are used up do we use protein metabolism. We don't need too much protein. It's very hard on the body. Protein metabolism is complex, and it's dirty, so to speak, because of the many byproducts that are produced and which often go out in the urine. Protein metabolism has several paths, some of which enter the Krebs cycle at various stages other than at the beginning, but most end up in that same acetyl group. So we can see that all nutrient catabolism ends up as the acetyl group. No matter what the source of intracellular catabolism, the last stage of it is the Krebs cycle that takes place within the cell. The acetyl group enters the Krebs cycle with the aid of acetyl coenzyme A. And acetyl coenzyme A is another one of those coenzymes which acts as a catalyst, just as the vitamins do. In the all-important Krebs cycle, there are very many complex biochemical interactions. There are actually 10 different biochemical reactions. For all of its complexity, it's just like any other fire. It releases carbon dioxide and water and energy, just like when we burn wood. The energy release is of two types, direct and indirect. The direct release of energy is in heat, body heat. The indirect release is in the production of ATP, adenotriphosphate, which is a biochemical byproduct. If you remember from the Scorpio talk, ATP supplied the energy to all sorts of activities in the body, such as the sodium-potassium pump. So that is a secondary source or an indirect source of the using of energy. It does this because it has an abundance of oxygen in the phosphate complex. Oxygen is readily released because of weak chemical bonds. This oxygen is used for oxidation or burning throughout the body wherever it is needed. It is indirect energy that is produced from intracellular metabolism. There are two things about intracellular catabolism, especially the Krebs cycle, which are significant and important for our spiritual and astrological understanding and for better living. The first is that all of the biochemical reactions are reversible or bidirectional. Normally, when a chemical reaction is performed, the chemicals are put together, the reaction occurs, and that is the end. Many reactions are irreversible, and when they are reversible, something must be done to cause the reversal. These reversals in metabolism occur spontaneously. Spontaneous action is what Aries is all about. Where there is strong Aries or Mars influence, there is a tendency to want to be a hero, to do everything by oneself. Materialistic scientists believe the idea of something like a vital body is unnecessary because they understand all of the chemistry in detail. They calculate the formulas of the interactions and everything works out. However, that doesn't explain why spontaneous interactions, reversal interactions occur. If pressed, they will say the reversals occur because the body needs the reversal. However, once one speaks of intelligence of need, one has gone beyond mere chemistry. This is true even if one brings in body sensors. Eventually, there is a guiding intelligence of some kind that makes decisions for the body. Eventually, one must look beyond the merely chemical. When one does that, the idea of an etheric vital body which interpenetrates the dense physical body makes sense. To a clairvoyant, it is a matter of perception. So, the spirit, through the vital body, causes the reversal as needed. The second important thing about the Krebs cycle is that it is a cycle. It is a very fast biochemical cycle. It goes in a circle, and it does so thousands of times per second. It is completed in a very few milliseconds in the case of glucolysis. This is fast enough to be in the range of the buzz of the vital body described by Max Heindel. That buzz is something like the whirling of a vortex. To understand all of this, we must remember the difference between the etheric subdivision and the chemical subdivision and their corresponding vehicles, the vital body and the dense physical body. A few talks ago, we talked about the phenomenon of organ rejection. In the dense physical body, it is chemical. And in the etheric vital body, it is a matter of vibrations. The vibrations don't fit together with an organ that has been taken into the body. Everything in the physical world, both the etheric and the chemical subdivision, spins. Spin in speed and direction of spin indicate the nature of consciousness of the thing that is spinning. In the chemical subdivision, it is like the earth rotating on its axis. In the etheric, it is like a vortex or a whirlpool. It is true of the atoms, both chemical and etheric, which are the life and stuff of the Krebs cycle. It is through these atoms and molecules that this fire takes place. So it is wise to study it, even a little bit. There are various descriptions of vital body atoms inside the chemical atoms of the dense physical body. Plato called them triangles, which like spearheads defend the physical body. Max Heindel called them prisms, prisms which are usually triangular. In other places, he describes the path of what material science would call an electron. He says it resembles a wire wastebasket with the wires overlapping like the diagrams of a satellite in orbit. And here I can give you a diagram so you can see what I'm saying. In reality, it is a complex vortex in the ethers, and it is spinning. In a simple way, it looks like another diagram that I can offer. And finally, there is a very complex diagram made by a contemporary of Max Heindel who very patiently observed an etheric atom and drew it out. However, the drawing is only two-dimensional, and it can only imply going into 3 or more dimensions. All of this is said to indicate an approximate way of how the spirit inserts itself into the dense physical body through the etheric vital body. This is how it causes the spontaneous fire we call metabolism through active atoms. The spontaneous change of directions is intelligent and purposeful, which is even seen by material scientists, even though they think it came about by a long, complex series of accidents in the chemical region of the physical world. The wonderful thing about all of this is how the spiritual ego, the self, activates and alters the process at will. We can rev up our metabolism, or in our deepest prayers it slows down so that we barely breathe at all. This is an active statement of the I am of Aries, manifest as metabolic fire to get things done in the dense physical body. That's all I have to offer in this tiny little talk, and I will close with the Rosicrucian student's prayer. O God, increase my love for Thee, so that I may serve Thee better from day to day. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Thank you.